welcome everybody, and can I welcome those members of the public that are watching this via the webcast. The normal housekeeping rules, can I ask everybody if they've got a mobile phone on them to make sure it's turned off, please. Can we go on to agenda item 1, attendance?
Apologies have been received from Councillor Graham, Taylor, Crick and Parish.
Thank you. So, according to my reckoning then, we've got 4 members of the committee who have not attended and have not gone to the trouble of giving their apologies, which is not particularly good. Go on to item agenda 2, declarations of interest.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not aware of any interests that need to be declared. If members have got any queries, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dana. So if anybody, as we go through the meeting, if you've got anything to declare, do it then. Item agenda 3, minutes of the previous meeting held on the 25th of March. We start off at page number 5. I'll go through it page by page. Page 5, page 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. 11 is intentionally blank. I take it we've all read it, and has anybody got any? We're happy that it's a true record, and do you have any comments? Thank you. Item agenda 4, action sheet, starts on page 13. Helen.
Only 2 items on the action sheet, Chair. The one is Adult Service Duty Pod. The recommendation responses have been received. And Children and Family Services Safeguarding, we're yet to see those recommendations.
Thank you. That's updated report progress. It starts on page 15.
Yes, Chair, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the progress made implementing scrutiny recommendations previously accepted by the Executive. You've had your agenda, so I'm not going to go through all the responses we've received and the impact, but I will just go through a few highlights. March 2014, we scrutinised the effectiveness of the Family Focus Service and its pilot. One of the recommendations we made was a suite of indicators should be selected to measure success of the service. This has been done, and the service can report since the scrutiny activity, the Family Focus team continues to successfully support children and their families through very difficult times. And this year they've managed to deregister 17 children from the Child Protection Register. Another highlight worth mentioning is November 2013 we scrutinised the Total Health 2 programme. And the committee recommended that the service continue to seek funding past the point of the current funding. Unfortunately, they couldn't continue that funding, but they were successful with aspects of the former Healthy Living services are embedded with the Lift Cody project, so there is a small focused service still running, so that's a good outcome. And lastly, we scrutinised the Leisure Trust monitoring, and the committee recommended that the scope of the Leisure Trust was not widened at that point in time. The recommendation was accepted, and there's no plans to increase the scope of the trust. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Helen. We go on to item agenda 6 now. This is the main agenda item, which is the redesign and remodelling of services for adults with learning disabilities. We've got 4 witnesses coming in. The first one is Neil Howell Housing. Can I say, before we bring Neil in, can I thank those committee members that attended with me and the 2 officers for the research visits we did to the community farm, the Green Wellies, and also Kainan, the accommodation. I think we as a committee learnt an awful lot of information, and it was very beneficial for us to actually get that background information. So thanks ever so much for attending. So we'll now ask Neil to come in, please. Hi, Neil. Thanks. Thanks ever so much for coming in. Just in case you weren't aware, the three committee members here, plus Councillor Parrish, we actually attended Kynant last Thursday, and we actually went and saw the accommodation that the people there have got. And we were really impressed. We were really pleased. But it was excellent. So, yeah, we were really happy with that. We've just got a couple of questions that we'd like your input on. Can you, first of all, explain the partnership arrangement between the RSLs and the Council regarding the core and cluster developments?
Yes, certainly. I suppose the Kynant development, I suppose, was a predecessor to a more formal agreement that we've now got in place called, I don't know if you've heard of the In One Place project, programme. And what we've got there, I suppose, is a agreement signed by chief executives, leaders, senior managers from across Gwent, including obviously social care, Aneurin Bevan Health Board, and the RSL chief executives. And that agreement basically agrees the principles of sharing information to better plan, coordinate for the needs of a whole range of different sort of groups of individuals, and obviously including specifically people with learning difficulties or disabilities. So we've now formalised, I suppose, what was previously an informal arrangement that we had in place. Obviously, because Kynant was developed really around joint working partnership between social care and housing within Torfaen, and specifically with Melin Homes and health colleagues. And I said that's probably a predecessor of, I suppose, the type of programme or arrangement that you had in place, which now will go into and feed into the In One Place programme. So it's a formal agreement, being signed at a very senior level, executive level. And I say the basic principles are that we will share information, understanding of the needs of our communities, to identify, I suppose, a more coordinated approach to picking up or identifying the health, social care and housing needs of those individuals. And we can plan that over a period of years then, obviously. So that, you know, that intelligence is that we understand that, you know, it sits within those different organisations, is now shared more appropriately. And it allows us, let's say, to better plan, I suppose, for specifically then for the accommodation needs, in terms of we have to have a 3-year rolling programme of new developments within each local authority. So Torfaen, part of the strategic housing team, we have a 3-year plan, I suppose, of potential developments that can come on stream. We'll get funding, obviously, to deliver largely what we, you know, affordable housing is what we talk about, but it's, you know, there's the social rented side of the housing market. As I say, we've already got excellent working relationships with our local RSLs. I've got to say, previously and up until recently, it's largely been the development side being delivered by Melin Homes, but Bronavon are now getting to a position whereby they can start to develop as well. So we've got a long history actually of working in partnership and you know, sharing that information. That's now been formalised, as I said, in the In One Place sort of programme project. So we're sharing that information so we can, as I said, better plan, I suppose, a more holistic approach to supporting different groups in our communities.
When we were talking to the residents there and the staff there, we noticed that none of the people that are in there at the moment were actually working. So where does the funding come from for their rent and so forth?
It largely, I suppose, come through from, unless they've got any particular income themselves, whether they're working or if they're not working, you know, it'll be through the housing benefit system, yeah, that will fund the rental element of the charges there.
Is that sustainable in the future?
It is obviously anybody who was on a low income or is unable to work. Obviously, they are covered by the benefit system. But I think the whole principle of what we're trying to achieve really is about exploring the potential for those individuals to actually go into employment, even if it's on a part-time basis, etc. And I think the initial feedback we've had, and of course we've done other similar schemes in the past, the outcomes that we've measured include, how, whether people are happier, healthier, fitter, etc. But I think the whole principle really is to try to support them to acquire perhaps different skills in knowledge and experience, so that they are able, those who are able, to go into the employment market, as I say, even if it's on a part-time basis or initially, a number of hours, etc. So it is about looking at that, the needs of the individual. And bringing in, I suppose, when necessary, training, development opportunities, so that they can acquire those skills, those knowledge, experience, qualifications, etc., so that they can move into the employment market. So, anybody who is eligible for housing benefit, they will get that. That's not under any threat. But I think that, the bigger picture for us really is about trying to improve the lives of those individuals and actually supporting them perhaps to become more independent and even, moving into employment.
Taking that one stage further then, is there a plan then to revisit this in, say, 12 months, 2 years, to say that we tried to improve your life and your expectations and so forth, but has this actually worked? I mean, the people we spoke to were very happy, but then they've only been in there a short period of time, and obviously after a period of time they might say, oh, actually I like the idea of having my own front door and so forth, but now I've been there for 6 months, I find I am becoming a bit isolated, and perhaps the family support that is there now, as the parents get older and so forth, less support is available. And also, if we expand this, there will be obviously less support, because there are going to be more people in accommodation. So how are we going to look at that in the future?
I suppose every individual will have a plan. Obviously, we'll sit down with individuals, look at the health, social care, housing needs of the individuals, and as part of that, they say you have to. It does very much rely upon, I suppose, the abilities of the individual, I suppose, in terms of moving forward. But I think actually we've done some studies over a long period of time. Many of the people who've gone into Kainan, perhaps who were living with carers, family, a lot of them with family previously, and actually in that formal setting, the independence probably was, was challenged. I suppose it becomes the norm, I suppose, to have mum and dad there looking after you, and there's a reliance upon, But as you're quite rightly pointing out, people getting older, I suppose, and I think the carers then, I suppose, get to an age where they actually cannot support the individual anymore. I think so in terms of taking into, I suppose, that bigger picture into account, the needs assessment that we undertake looks at a whole range of different things, and the risks to the individual, their skills, abilities, their care needs, their health needs, etc. So that we've got that, shared understanding, that knowledge, I suppose. And I think for us, that monitoring is constant. I think, we will continually review, I suppose, that plan for the individual. We've got a baseline position, I think, for those individuals before they went into Kainan. We will monitor that on an ongoing basis. It may be quarterly, it may be 6 monthly, it may be annually. And we're focusing very much now on the outcomes for the individual. So some of the questions we're teasing out are, do they feel happier? Do they feel more independent? Do they feel healthier? And of course, the proof of the pudding will be if some of them do enter into the employment market and actually doing things for themselves and actually deriving an income from that. So it'll be a constant process to monitor the outcomes for the individuals, and of course that feeds back into, I suppose, the continuing sort of needs assessment to ensure that we are supporting them to become more independent in the longer term.
Yeah, hi Neil. I just want to know, how have you got a list of how many people who are in need of this type of accommodation? And depending on, I know it depends on future planning and developments, but, you know, how many developments do you know are planned for the future?
Yes, you know, a good piece of work was done, I suppose, some time ago to map. I think it's contained in the report that you've received. Tried to map the needs of individuals, I suppose, in terms of this client group, not just locally in Torfaen, but across Gwent. So we have got that information now, and of course, that from a housing development perspective, that's essential for us to be able to plan for the future. I think the critical thing is that, you know, the programme that we have to put in place, the social housing grant programme, we will continue with that anyway, I suppose. What we are able to do now, I suppose, as those schemes start to come forward, it may be a piece of land, or we may have a building that is no longer fit for purpose, so we can remodel the accommodation. As we go forward, because we've got that, the needs mapped, we can look at each individual development and see if we've got a scheme of 30 units. We could say, well, actually, we can use 4 of those units for this client group. It could be learning disabilities. It could be another 6 for physical disability, people with physical disabilities. So we're using that intelligence to be able to shape the community, that wider community, I suppose. So the programme will continue. And what we're able to do as things come on screen, we've got that information so that we can then, as I said, shape and have a better understanding of the needs going forward. And of course, people won't always want to be based in Cwmbran. It depends on obviously where their networks are, where their support mechanisms are. So, you know, we'll have schemes and developments going on across the borough. But because we did that piece of research, because we've done that needs mapping exercise, and of course the numbers of people coming through transition, younger people coming through into adulthood now as well, that's going to be critical for us, because obviously they'll have perhaps aspirations to go into their own home, having their own front door, etc. So we've got that information, and that can help us then, let's say, better shape. So we've got more balanced communities in the future, because I think in the past perhaps we've clustered these individuals perhaps inappropriately into, not so long back we had group homes, but not very pleasant actually, and totally unsuitable. But now, you've been to Cynan, you've seen the setting. There's a wider, sort of group. You've got, the extra care, older persons accommodation as well, and you've got a balance there, because some of the properties more in that development have been sold, in the open market, etc. So you've got a real rich mix of individuals living in that sort of community. So we've got that information. We've got a 3-year rolling programme for the development side of things, so we can bring those two together, so to shape things for the future. So,
I know you've got the rolling plan. What level of investment is required from the council for each scheme?
Okay, we use the social housing grant that we get allocated every year from Welsh Government, and that's unfortunately been cut over the last number of years. Our allocation last year and this year is 1.3 million. So that is used to support these developments. The RSL partners obviously have to make a contribution themselves. We may get contributions from planning gains, Section 106 agreements, etc. So it's a combination really of funding streams that we tap into, both for the capital and for the ongoing running costs, the revenue as well. It could, the housing benefit is utilised, the RSL's own private finance, the social housing grant programme, obviously the health needs are picked up from the health board, social care obviously are funding appropriately the care needs of individuals. So it's a real package of funding streams and resources that is utilised here. You asked a question about sort of future schemes. We've got a couple of schemes coming off in Blenavon and 1 or 2 in the south as well. That we're looking at the moment is Hillside Drive in Blenavon. There's a couple of units there have been earmarked for through, I suppose, the In One Place programme. The first In One Place project that got off the ground was Lion Court in Blenavon. We're looking at Somerton House formerly the hotel B&B down in the south as well. So we've got a range of sites that we're currently working on developing, and what we'll do is put a project group together, representatives of the health board, social care, housing, the RSL. So from an early stage where planning, I suppose, that development to make sure that we cater for the needs of individuals. But again, making sure that that community is mixed. It's not just solely for one purpose, I suppose.
I think that's one of the things that we were, that those of us who visited Cainant were thinking about, is that basically Cainant is as brilliant a site as there is in the entire borough, because that it's so accessible to just about everything that people would want. And that was the thing which I think concerned a number that I mean, for example, Somerton House, while in many ways, yes, it's owned by the life, but still, there's still a feeling of it being a little bit isolated and a bit stuck away. And so, I suppose that's the challenge that you have, is trying to get the balance right, because let's be honest, that not every site will be a Cainant.
And Cainant, extra care, an extra care facility, not the LD, it's hugely expensive. Hugely expensive, and I'll be honest with you. Personally, I doubt very much whether or not we'll be in a position in the future to fund another extra care facility. Having said that, obviously we have, we are able to develop schemes, and of course it depends on the network of support that is available for those individuals. There are clearly people who will want to stay in the area they were born and brought up in. So not everybody, with all due respect, Cainant is fantastic. It's right next to the town centre. There's lots of different facilities, leisure facilities, shopping facilities. But, if you're born and bred in Blenavon, then you probably wouldn't want to wander down, So I think it is important for us to look at, a range of different development opportunities across the borough. Funding is a challenge, always has been, always will be, I suppose. But I think, in partnership, and I think because we have got excellent partnership arrangements in place, we are able to bring these schemes forward, and we wouldn't, I don't think, inappropriately place somebody, from the south, but always been living in Cwmbranna. So we wouldn't put them in, Blenavon, away from all of their networks, their family, their connections, etc. We'd look at the needs of others as part of that overall assessment I made reference to earlier on. So we need, the bottom line, we haven't got enough affordable housing provision in the borough. We've got, 3,500 people on the waiting list. We now better understand the needs of specific client groups, like people with learning disabilities, people with physical disabilities. So we better understand their needs as well. So it's and where they want to be housed. So we've got a rich picture of the needs of those individuals.
And I would imagine one of the biggest things is it's not just the individual need, but the extended family. If they're going to support that individual, it's no good having somebody in Blenavon if the rest of the family live in Llantarnam or somewhere and can't drive and all the rest of it. I think. Any more questions? Neil, thanks ever so much. That's been really, really useful.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
So we've now got Jim Wright, who we know, and Cathy Marshall, who we've met. So, yeah. So, Mandy, if you want to lead off, and then I'll take over for the Cathy Marshall bit. Hi both, thanks ever so much for coming along, and can I once again say thank you so much for accommodating us when we came out to visit. We were really, really impressed, and because we spent ages afterwards talking about it, and we really enjoyed it, and it gave us an awful lot more information than we would have had if we just scrutinised the actual report. Mandy, handle.
Hi, both. Jim, how do you see day activity services shaping up in the future?
It's a good question. At the moment, we've put together a little bit of a plan around that, of how we restructure and reshape our day services. The main principle for me within what we do in day services is about making it as person-centred as possible. If you look back into the history of where day services come from, you look at institutions, you look at day centres, not particularly person-centred approaches. As we go forward, I think it's very important that we tend to label people with one label of learning disability or mental health issue or whatever. But everybody's uniquely individual, and the responses that we provide to people need to be uniquely individual as well. I think one of the priorities for me as well within day services is how we ensure that people with a learning disability have a voice in what happens to them. And that's what I mean by person-centred. People really own what happens to them. And we spend a lot of time getting to know people, understanding them, their wishes, their dislikes, their aspirations and their dreams, if you like. And how do we make that difference in their life? That's what day opportunities needs to be about. And it needs to be much more broader than just an activity or going to a centre. It needs to be about real life and doing things within people's community, engaging with the community, with everyone within our communities, not just within a learning disability community, but a wider community that involves everyone, really.
Yeah, thank you. I totally agree with you. In the report, in 7.6.2, it says about complaints and appeals. Many cases, services offered is reduced to 3 days on the need. Have you had a lot of appeals and complaints about?
I don't deal directly with the appeals or complaints, but perhaps Cathy can answer. Yeah.
We've had a few, not lots, and some of them have been re-looked at and decisions changed due to sort of additional information becoming available. But on the whole, where we've reduced services, we've done it where there are other opportunities for people to tap into. Sometimes when you sort of approach families, it's sort of like, oh, well, yeah, but, you know, this individual could try doing this instead. We have support workers within the team, and where we think that the impact of a loss of a day service would have been detrimental, we've either kept it where it was and not reduced it, or we've used our support workers to work with that person around identifying alternative opportunities for them in the community that are not sort of a statutory provision, but something that they can just attend and go along to.
Thank you. In the report, it talks an awful lot about how there's been this communication, and we've been asking people with learning difficulties what they want, what they would like. How do you deal with that if you ask somebody what they want, they have this habit of actually giving you an answer, and they tell you what they want. How do you marry that up with what they want, what they need, and what we can actually afford? Because sometimes those three are three completely different things.
Absolutely. And of course, what people want often, particularly people who've been in services, tend to respond in services because that's what they're used to, and that's what they've always been given. Actually, we will always meet people's needs, but we will support them to meet those needs in creative ways going forward. So it won't always be, oh, you need a day service. It'll be, you need the opportunity to mix and engage with other people. What sort of opportunities are there out there in the community that can support you to do that? It is going to be difficult going forward. We all accept that because statutory provision is getting tighter, but we're working with providers and with the voluntary sector around what they can sort of offer as well, so that people have got a range of opportunities to choose from, really.
Thanks. And is most of those opportunities in county, or have you got to go out of county a lot? And if you do, how many of the out county day service placements are there, and what are the associated costs?
We've got hardly any out-of-county placements, actually. Specifically for day service, I'm not sure there's a couple where for people with who've got sort of quite specific needs. We tap into some provision in Newport area, but the majority of our opportunities are within Torfaen, and people can access those. But there are a few people, and actually we're going to be working on looking at whether we could meet their needs more locally as well going forwards.
Getting back to the thing about saying the third sector and voluntary organisations and so forth, would some of these be, have you looked at organisations, if say it was to do particularly with the age of those that you're working with, that say if we're talking older people, would organisations such as Age Concern be brought in, and then with younger people, organisations, be it youth service or young people's organisations within have you explored any of those?
Yeah, I totally agree, and I think it's rather than looking at somebody's deficits, if you look at their assets as well, look what their interests are. It may not be about a voluntary organisation. It may be somebody likes football. Is there a local football club that they could get involved in? Is there, I don't know, depending, there's lots of things that are going on that aren't necessarily specifically for people because of what they're missing in their life, and I think for me it's quite often about focusing on the positives. Having said that, we've done lots of good work with the youth service, because I think the youth service is about youth, and if you're young, why not do stuff with the youth service? We've actually funded some work with the youth service around summer programs and holiday programs, where young people with disabilities get involved with people who haven't got disabilities as well. We do work with Age Connect quite a lot, and we've done quite a lot of joint work with them, and lots of. I've been involved with TVA and setting up the Community Connectors project, which is a great little project about connecting people into the community. People. That's a generic program. It's not about just people with learning disabilities, but across the board, looking at how people can get involved in their communities more.
How successful has the Stepping Stone to Employment been?
Stepping Stones to Employment, yeah, that is we've had some successes. I would say it's not as successful as you would like. Some people have gone on into employment. Some people, we've just got a couple of people actually now starting employment with Vision Products in Newport, one person, and another person starting an apprenticeship. That's new. Yeah, it is quite difficult to find opportunities in the way the jobs are these days. They're different kinds of jobs, different kinds of skills, less manual jobs. It can be quite hard to find the opportunities out there. And I was speaking to Kathy before we came in. Some of these things are not just about skilling people up. It's about working with employers and creating opportunities with employers. And that's a difficult piece of work. It's beyond possibly social care. It needs to be a wider approach, really, if that's going to be successful. And likewise, I think there's responsibilities with the job centres and with the disability employment advisors and different agencies out there. I don't think employment sits perfectly well just within social care. It's a much wider issue.
Can you explain how you intend to change the service to make it more sustainable, and how will these changes improve the service user?
Are we talking in-day opportunities? Yeah. Changes are very much about that dialogue and that conversation that we have with people. I think to start off with, it's that person-centred approach. It's about valuing people as positives, seeing the positives in them, their attributes, their skills, their aspirations, working with that, working with the wider community, developing those partnerships that we talked about, and working to outcomes with individuals. So we're not just about maintaining people in a service, providing respite. I think that's often been the case in the past. It's really about delivering something tangible that person wants. It could be a new skill, it could be around friendships, it could just be about doing something that they enjoy and having fun with that, really. And I think that as society, we need to embrace people with learning disabilities and other disabilities within our society. What we've done historically is shut people away, and I think it's a duty of all citizens to embrace people with differences and with equality. In terms of service, I think what we're doing is a lot of work with our staff in terms of what they need, having those discussions with staff around what do you need to do if this is the case. How do we bring this around? So we're talking about that. We're making that an issue within our meetings, and we're restructuring our services around 3 different areas. So one focuses on people who need more of a sensory kind of experience, so people with very complex needs. And another area focuses on work life, really. So it's about work life and preparing people to move forward into work. And a third project is around real life and experiencing real life and developing life skills.
I must admit, Councillor Parish and I, when we went and met Greenwellies, the thing that we were most impressed with is how happy they were. They were all smiling, and they were so, when we asked them to explain what they were doing, they were sort of fighting each other to make sure they were the one that was explaining. And we went out to, I forget the place it was called, where they just cut all the grass and maintained the grounds. They were really, you can see how pleased they were to say that I'm the one who did the strimming, and I know I have to wear this and I have to use... And that was fantastic. So we really, really enjoyed that. And it was good to see how much they enjoyed actually doing it. Kathy, if I can come on now to your area, our visit to Kinant. What were the main lessons you've learned from creating that?
That we should have done it 10 years ago, actually, because it's just been... It was a long time coming to fruition, obviously, from the original conversations with housing strategy and everything. It does take a long time in the development, and we did have some difficulties along the way. I think doing something from scratch means that the service users that we were trying to engage with around what was being offered, I'm not sure the message got quite as wide as we'd have liked, and I think going forward when we do the other projects we'll really go into the day services, we'll use the service users' experience now to help other people understand what it is that's on offer, really, in terms of that independence. So I think it's about making sure that more people understand what's on offer. As I say, we did sort of mail shot everybody, but it's not the same as really sort of that face-to-face engagement. So I think we would definitely do that differently. The other difficulty that we came across, and it wasn't really of our doing, but it did lead to some anxieties, was that there was such a long lead-in time, and we wanted to give people who were offered the opportunity to have a flat plenty of time to sort of develop their skills a bit, and to work with them around what it's like to have your own tenancy. But because the bill got a bit delayed, that time stretched almost too long, and people were sort of getting quite anxious about when they could move, could they still move. So that was quite a difficult juggling act, really. But we got there in the end, and everyone stayed there.
You explained on the day how you chose the people that were going to go in there, but as more developments come online, will you just say, well, we accommodated 1 to 6, now the next one will be 7 to 8, or will you start a completely new selection process?
I think we're going to start a completely new selection process, because I think a lot more people now will want to express their interest, may want the opportunity to try independent living, perhaps through using the training flat or other opportunities. So I think we'll start again from scratch. We'll relook at there's the practicalities of who'd be suitable for the accommodation, which is often around sort of, obviously, Kynant is over three floors, so you've got to look at people's mobility and whether they would be suitable for the upper floors or ground floors. Then it's how much support they would need within the flats themselves in order to sort of manage independent living. So it's about looking at all those things. But no, we will start from scratch and see who's interested.
And talking about this,
I'm just going to add something. It's just what I see as well. Before Kynant came around, we created the film to let people know that this was an option. But what I've seen now is that people have they know about it because they talk to each other and they go around each other's flats. So it's now an option that people can understand. And there'll be much more interest because people have seen it and seen how successful it's been for their friends and colleagues, really. So, yeah, it should be an easy sell. Yeah.
We know this is a success, and we're looking at more areas in Blenavon and in the south, but you're still going to only have the same amount of staff. So how are you going to provide the support for these other areas when they come online, when you're only going to have the same amount of staff? Or perhaps less?
Yeah, I mean, each person's needs will be assessed on an individual basis. So staff can move around. It's not just the staff from Kynant. You know, we used mostly supporting people funding within the Kynant flats. But the amount of support that was needed in there initially and the amount of support that's going in there now looks very different. There's a lot less support going in because perhaps we were slightly overcautious. Perhaps we wanted people to have the best opportunity, I suppose, of it being a success. So we wanted to put enough support in to make sure we could meet people's needs. But as time's gone on and people have demonstrated increased independence with the provider worked very closely with each individual to build their own skills. So the amount of staffing that was in Kynant is less. So hopefully we can recycle some of that up into the other projects. And the plan is that the same thing happens. You put in a certain amount of support, but you enable people to become as independent as possible, so the support needs reduce.
So it's fair to say that the care package and support has come down because of the independent living?
Yeah, quite dramatically, yes.
No. I mean, on the day, it was lovely to meet one of the residents who was very, very positive and was telling us all what they go into each other's flats, and they've got a really good social network. But have there been any issues with people being isolated at all?
Obviously, everybody in the flats is an individual at the end of the day. So although we did some sort of meet and greet type stuff, Jenny, who was the transformation officer at the time, sort of arranged some sort of social events so that everybody would at least know each other before they moved into the flat. Obviously, by its very nature, people form friendships. You can't make people be friends. The whole point is the support is there if you want it. But no, we haven't had... I'm not saying everybody's great friends and that they're in and out of each other's flats all the time. Some are, but some aren't. As you would in any sort of neighbourhood, some people are friends and some aren't. But no, we've not had any real problems over, relationship issues or anything.
Have any of the service users gone on to actually gain employment yet?
Yeah, like I said, we've got a couple of people who have pretty much as a result of some of the reductions in services have found some employment. I've actually got a missed call on my phone today, which I think is confirming that one of the chaps has been offered a full-time job in Vision Products. A chap we met, actually, on the countryside team. So he's actually been offered that. And his colleague has been offered an apprenticeship as well. So that's two people in the last few months, really.
Yes, and that's great. It is difficult, as Jim said earlier. It's not straightforward. There aren't as many opportunities out there. But what we are doing, I guess, is not just looking for paid employment, but trying to find people voluntary work opportunities so that they can almost build their own CV, so that at some point in the future, if they can demonstrate sort of a commitment to a role, hopefully they'll have a better opportunity of employment in the future.
As I've been at Kynant, which was fascinating, and so I think it was a point with Neil Howell as well, that one of the things about Kynant is that the position of Kynant is basically it's one of the best positions you could find anywhere for easy access to just about everything you need. And I think that's one of our concerns, that say, with the new development, with the possible development at Somerton House, is the concern of some is that's not as easy a place to get to or go from. Some people might consider it to be rather isolated, particularly for individuals who are dependent on issues such as public transport. Have you looked into how these, because Neil told us that we were having long discussions on these matters, have you been looking closely at how we work around things such as how you can make how people getting the right people to be into places like of this new development?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Kynant couldn't have been bettered in terms of its location, and you know, we had to accept the fact that, you know, any other developments weren't going to be quite as convenient. It is on a bus route. We will do some work with people around sort of catching buses, that kind of thing. And the same as other people, they would also have the opportunities to sort of taxi, community transport. There's other sort of transport options available for people. But transport will obviously, when we're sort of looking through people who are interested, obviously that will be one of the considerations, is would they become socially isolated because they couldn't access transport? So that will be one of the things that we look at when we're talking to people.
Well, one other thing was that we saw, which getting back to the point you made earlier, we saw the DVD looking at the new tenants for Kynant and all the various things, and and it did indeed show some of the social events that you did, such as the Indian Bowlplex. Would you be able to do similar things when you set up similar? When you're setting out to bring together the tenants in any new developments, such as the ones planned at Somerton House and the ones in Blenavon? Would you be looking to do so?
Absolutely. I think the model that we used, which was around sort of working with people for some time before they actually moved in, did work very well, and it did help people to know who was going to be their next door neighbour and who was going to be upstairs, downstairs. So absolutely, part of the whole principle of this type of development is that people are enabled to sort of know who their neighbours are, what their interests are, so that natural friendships can form if appropriate, and, you know, if that's what they want, yes.
I think it's important to realise that all people don't get on with everybody else, and do they? Last question. What makes the core and cluster more sustainable than other forms of accommodation?
It's not a one-size-fits-all. Core and cluster will suit some people. We have a range of different housing options, some of which will suit people better than others, and depending on people's support needs and wishes, it's sort of part of our portfolio, I suppose. It is more sustainable in the sense that because it's an individual tenancy, people can sort of have their own space, but then access other opportunities as they want to. We've got some forms of supported living where we've got sort of 3 or 4 people perhaps sharing a house with support going into the house. Now, some of those work well, but if somebody moves out and you've got a space, then compatibility can be a real difficult issue if you're trying to find somebody who might want to move in, but you've already got 3 people who are there, and you have to really sort of consider with with the people who are already living there, as well as the person who wants to move in, whether it's the right move for them. So in that way, it's a bit more sustainable. But as I say, it's not the only option going forward. It can never be.
Say in an instance like that, would you actually sit down and say, discuss it with the other three, saying this person wants to come in, how do you feel?
Absolutely, because it's their house and they've got their own tenancies. And what we tend to do is, if we've got somebody who's interested in a particular vacancy, we would never just move them straight in. We would obviously talk to the individual who's interested in moving in, talk to the people who are already living there, and then we'd have like a couple of tea visits, or just sort of, because they may already know the person from other opportunities and they may not. So, you'd sort of do a gradual process of sort of, is this going to work, before any final decision is made as to whether somebody moves in or not.
So, because we know it works and it has worked really well, which Gwent learning difficulty strategy outcomes have been achieved for service users?
I think they're all going to be a work in progress. I think nothing will ever be signed, sealed, and that's the end of it. It's always going to be a sort of a developing picture. I think we've worked really hard around the accommodation one, and really hard around the sort of relationships and education. I think the bits that we're sort of focusing on today are the bits that we've really worked hard at, because that's what the service users have told us. That's their life. And so those are the bits I would say that we've worked well on. I think other bits of it, we'll need to do some more work on in the next couple of years.
Well, it's lovely. It was really, I think everybody who went there was really pleased with. I'm watching the video, and I think, the hard work shows, so well done.
Jim, there's one thing I've just thought off the top of my head. When we were talking to you earlier, when we did the site visit, it was explained to us that one of the problems was transport, and the cost of the transport and the practicalities of picking people up and getting there. Have you explored that if you devoted more time, energy and money into teaching them to use public transport, that would alleviate that problem? Has that...
Funnily enough, yes. We've got an assisted transport policy coming to Cabinet in July, funny enough. And that is one of the aspects of that policy that I think is really important, that's to give people freedom and independence. To be able to access public transport is a really important thing. But it does take time, and it does take investment. It's a short-term, relatively short-term investment, but has lifelong consequences. I think it's a lot easier sometimes to put somebody onto a minibus and say, oh, well, it's taken care of. But if we spend the time and investment in that short-term process of working with somebody to be able to access public transport, the freedom that gives somebody, the independence, that could lead to employment, could lead to so many more different experiences than that just very narrow service kind of led processes. So it is a really important thing. We need to invest more in that, and it's something that's highlighted in that assisted transport policy.
Have you considered trying to get sponsorship on the side of your vans and so forth?
That's a good point. Yeah, no, but it's a good idea. Yeah.
And also...
I have to admit it wasn't mine, it was Helen's.
That's a good idea.
Do you have any relationships with Torvine Community Transport?
Yes, we do. We have some contracts with Torvine Community Transport in terms of supporting that process of people getting to and from the community, from their homes into the community or into different services. Yeah.
Just came back, as you said, about ensuring that there's a wide range of opportunity. But would you say that there is maybe it could end up of spreading it too thinly? That there's maybe that sometimes you try to do too much, trying to be all things to all people, and it can end up being spread a bit too thinly.
It depends how you try and do it. I think if you tried to do it yourself, within our resources, absolutely, we'd never do it. We'd never be able to achieve that. But if we look outwards and look to bring people in and use that resource that's outside, you know, like you talked about the voluntary organisations, the third sector, but also just the capital that we've got in our citizens. That's the way to make it work, and to look at the assets that we have within Torfaen and what they can bring to the lives of people with disabilities. That's what it's going to work. If it came down to money and providing staff, we've had it. There's no way we can do it. But if we look to build the partnerships, to work with others, to create the opportunities for people with learning disabilities, we've got a chance. But it's dangerous. It's not easy.
Declaring a bit of interest here. I'm the Vice Chair of Government Centre for Young People. Right. I know that they've done work particularly with the young people from Crown Bridge. Yes. And wondered if there are any opportunity, because one of the groups that they say is one of the problem is actually when they're leaving Crown Bridge at 16, the 16 to 25 can often be a bit of almost a lost group, that when they're this when they're children, and then they go into adults. But the thing is, between 16 and 25, there's almost like a fallow period. So maybe that's something you could look into to contact on that.
Yeah, we recognise that people transitioning from school, that can be a very difficult time for people. And that was one of the objectives within the strategy as well, was around improving transitions for people. So we've made some strides in that way. We have a transition social worker who will begin to pick people up. She work alongside children's services between sort of the ages of 16 and 18, so that they can work together around supporting that young person into adulthood where appropriate. We also have annually we meet up and look to see who's going to be transitioning out of Crown Bridge or out of college, for example, because a lot of people who leave Crown Bridge then go to college. So we look at who's transitioning out a year in advance. So we've then got a year to work with that person around what that transition might look like and what sort of opportunities they would like once they've left either school or college. So we're not there yet, but in fact we've got the roll call tomorrow. But we're certainly making improvements in that area.
I think it'd be fair to say there's a resource difference, but to an extent, between children and adults. I think because of the different ways that those services are funded, it's more difficult to provide the same or similar kind of services that people were receiving whilst in full-time education as children.
Happy? Kathy and Jim, can I just say thanks ever so much once again for coming along, and can I ask you to go back to your staff and thank them for the input they made when we visited last week and say how much we appreciate it. Thank you. So the last person we've got to come in is Head of Adult Services, Jill Pratlett. I think we've met Jill before on a number of occasions. The other thing is, we did agree when we were on the visit last week that I would write to the appropriate officers thanking them on behalf of the committee. I'll get that done next week. Thanks. Hi Jill, thanks ever so much for coming in. I'm sure you know, but as part of our research into this subject, we actually visited the Green Wellies last Wednesday, and last Thursday we visited Keenant, and we were really, really impressed. We really thought they were brilliant. And the thing that really came home to us is how happy they all were. They were all smiling, and when we went out and visited the people that were doing the grounds maintenance, they were all really sort of eager to show us what they were doing and how they did it. So we were really impressed with that. As you know, normally we've all read the report, so there's no need to go through the report, but if you can just give us a very brief update on anything that's perhaps happened since the report was written, and then we'll go into the questions.
I think really, as you would have probably picked up, members, it is an ongoing journey. So, yes, there was kind of a recognition, kind of going back, as the report says, to almost like 2011-12, when we were looking at the learning disability strategy. We did need to take more of a strategic direction and really kind of to focus on where we were going. And I think as the report kind of takes you through that, there is a recognition that we had been too paternalistic. And I say I mean we as society, we as a council and we as a department, because I think it kind of stems right the way through the different layers. So as kind of where the additional progress since the report was written, I mean, I guess it is just kind of like the continuation of the journey. And I think in the report, and if you bear with me, Chair. And the 8.4, the current planned work programme. I mean, I don't intend to kind of take you through all those points. I think it was just kind of an indication of all the work that is going on. And none of those have kind of reached a conclusion. And for a lot of those points, I wouldn't expect them ever to, because it will be a constant evaluation and going back to the users and carers of the service to constantly evolve that. And I guess Cathy and Jim would have picked up on some of those conversations that we have. I mean, I haven't been party to that, but I'm sure they would have explained some of how we do that, really.
Should we talk about the transformation? Can you tell us how many services have been redesigned, modelled, and what the efficiencies have been achieved?
In the transformation, a number of different work streams. The Transformation Board, which I chaired, was looking at, I think again it highlights in the report, about working with providers differently. So when we're saying, what services have been transformed, first of all, we kind of worked with providers in supported living, having those conversations about maybe you need to be looking at different models. And so I think, as a result of that, I think we can see in the report that one of the supported living units was actually closed. Because, again, listening to what people are telling us, they do not want that type of... A lot of people with learning disability do not want that type of living. They want their own front door, as we've delivered in Cainant. So again, it is an evolving process, though, because we have clients that are already in supportive living, which is probably right for them, because that's where they've been for a considerable number of years. That's where their friendships are. That's where their relationships are, and their connections to the community. We have clients that are living at home at the moment, and I think there's reference in the report, maybe 101 clients, I think, are still living at home. And we're working with those clients to see what are the next steps. And again, for some clients, it will be that early indication of that more independent living, which is kind of why we're looking at the developing the additional housing options up in Somerton, particularly around the autistic spectrum disorder, because that's a particular area that we've certainly highlighted through our needs analysis that we need to respond to. We have clients that we're picking up now through the transition work, rather than the transformation work, and we're picking up some of those themes when particular complex cases when clients are about 14, 15, because some of the build-in time, particularly around housing options, is that you do need to be having those conversations very on with carers. The work that we're doing in day opportunities, and again, Kathy and Jim are working very closely together there around completely transforming day opportunities. I know a number of you would have been members when we first looked at day opportunities, and I'm going back a bit, I'm thinking probably about 7 years ago, where the highway then was very much an old, and I mean that, an old day centre of clients being picked up in the minibus all around the borough, going to the highway, all sitting around the tables doing exactly the same thing all day. And we've come a long way in the last 6, 7 years for that, but actually it's now, it's the next phase. And quite rightly, clients are more articulate through their advocates about what they want, and it has to be very client-centred and not, dare I say, for the, as it used to be like 7 years ago, day activities for the staff and not for the clients. Yeah, and I would say that's very much, please, is around 7 years ago, and the history behind that.
Jill, can we look at specifically paragraph 7.2.4, where you talk about, you looked at best practice identified elsewhere, and you talk about invest to save. Can you tell us what you found when you looked elsewhere and where you looked, and can you tell us how much you actually saved because of that invest to save?
The two things there, Chair. The invest to save post was around one particular person who worked with the providers on what I would call this funding matrix. We have had a number of supported living schemes in the borough. When we kind of mapped out individual tenants in those schemes, what care they were getting. If I could just give an example, you might have a house with four tenants, and that not necessarily all tenants who originated from Torvine either, so maybe tenants from other areas, so there's a bit of complexity there. Then kind of mapping out what the individuals in that home needed. And then what we looked at, almost like what I would refer to as a shared care matrix. So you can imagine it's 4 people in a home. There are some times that maybe those carers, those clients are cooking and they need support, but not every person needs one-to-one support. So throughout a 24-hour period, there would be times where you might need 2 staff for 4 clients, 1 staff for 4 clients, 3 staff, and it was actually plotting that out on a 24-hour basis. Now, how much savings we made of that, I mean, I'll have to go back to kind of give you the definitive, but certainly in the region of certainly over £100,000 of care that we could recycle, because clients didn't always need one member of staff to one member of staff. They do on occasions, because when they're having social activities, you would expect that client to have a member of staff when they're going into the community, but not 24 hours a day. So the time that took for that individual transformation officer, again, to work alongside providers, because at the end of the day, it was a reduction in income for the providers. So it was important that they were on board as well, and obviously the clients were on board, the carers were on board. So that was a particular piece of work that resulted in us being able to reduce the amount of care. The other part of that was the cost of the care per hour. And I know in the report it makes reference to a reducing from £24 to £14, 6, yeah.
7.3 in 7.3.1, where it says about the standardised hourly rate reduced from £25 per hour at its highest to £14.50.
Yeah. I mean, what I would say there, I mean, the £25 per hour obviously was the very top end. But again, we looked at rationalising that rate with the providers, and it over a number of years to come up with what we all agreed was a reasonable rate around the £14.50. So again, that took an awful lot of work from an individual, the funded through the InvestorSave, to reduce that rate. So again, what I will do is go back to give you the exact figure, Chair, if you're acceptable of that, to give you the exact figure of what that piece of work brought us back in savings. The other part then, is around what do we do around best practice? And if I'm absolutely honest, if there is anything around best practice, my first point of call is I would say to Jim, what have you read about this? Because most times he will go off and get me more detail, but we will be able to say, in Birmingham they do this. He maps out the country somehow of best practice. So I call on what I would see my staff as my experts to pulling along that, and Kathy as well. They obviously they work hand in hand and very much kind of pushing the boundaries, I would say, about this looks really interesting, let's go and find out more. Which doesn't mean having to drive there, but certainly, yes. Jim is my eyes and ears across not just the UK, across the world, basically.
Yeah, and I know on the previous scrutiny meetings, when we had dealings with Jim, we've always been very impressed, and Kathy as well with them. Looking at specifically now, paragraph 4.6, it explains about the criteria and how people are assessed, and because of cuts, we're only now able to deal with those who are assessed as, or we're not looking at people now who have moderate to low level. Can you tell us exactly how somebody is categorised?
There is a risk matrix. So when we're looking at working with a client around an assessment, there are certain domains in the assessment which might be around personal care, emotional support, financial support. So a client may be at risk, say a substantial risk around their personal care, but maybe at a lower risk around their emotional support. So it doesn't mean if somebody is at a low risk, they're in a low risk at all domains. And again, I'm quite happy to provide you with the matrix that we use. It's under the Fair Access to Care policy, which is issued through Welsh Government. You will obviously all be aware that we did take a report through members over 12 months ago now about raising the eligibility criteria, and it did go some way in that report to explaining. But what I'm happy to do is to share, to circulate that again. But it's around the risk to the individual. So if somebody is able to do a task, but struggles with that task, they would be at moderate risk. They wouldn't necessarily be provided with a service or a support package, because they are able to do that task or that activity. And what we would be looking is for people to use their strengths. And again, it goes back to my previous comment, is I think we have been too quick to go in and fix and to kind of almost take that person's independence away from them. So that's why we look at that person's strengths and that person's risk. And if it's only that through a support package that they will be able to do something, then that might tip our barriers around our critical and substantial need. But it's very much around the risk to the individual, and it's around certain task. So somebody might be critical in one task and low in another activity.
I think the thing that concerned us when we read the report and we discussed it was what happens to those people who are classed as moderate to low level. Do we just leave them to their own devices, or do we point them in other directions where they can obtain help?
I think we had a very similar conversation, Chair, when we were looking at the duty pod and older people, and if they don't meet our criteria. What we are going to do now, which we haven't up to date, is to extend the remit of the community connectors to clients with learning disabilities, because they have very much focused on older people up to now. Again, in the last scrutiny session, Chair had explained around the use of community connectors, and they're now funded through the Intermediate Care Fund that we can refer clients into. There are a number of voluntary organisations within the community. I think probably more around the moderate need are the clients that maybe we have queries around that we would signpost. But clients with a low-level learning disability would very rarely actually come to the doors of social care because they, as you would expect, access services services as any other citizen would around leisure activities. They would go to the leisure centre, and certainly that's what we would expect and we would encourage. Certainly they have support through job centres now to look at gaining long-term employment. So for low-level need, I wouldn't really expect those clients to come near social care.
Just as a general point, is there sort of like is there a regular assessment of individuals? Say, if an individual, are individuals assessed regularly, or is it as and when they wish, or what?
Any clients who are known to us are open and known to the learning disability team. They would have a review of that, and so an update of their assessment minimum of once a year. What we're finding, particularly around clients with a quite profound learning disability, that quite often has to happen 2 or 3 times in the year, just due to the complexity of the case, but it's a minimum of once a year.
I think one of the things we were discussing and we were concerned about was if they're supported by their family, but then as the parents are likely to get older and therefore less able to give that support, do we regularly look at that aspect of it?
That is one of the challenges, I think, because I think as a council and department recognise that a lot earlier than the ageing parent does. So we try to have those conversations earlier, but sometimes there are some blockages from the ageing parent where we might be able to see their ability to manage and support decreasing as they're becoming frailer. And again, I think in the report it mentions a number of carers that are probably in their 80s plus now, but very reluctant to agree to any planning because they don't. It is difficult for people to acknowledge that they are no longer be able to continue caring like they have been. So yes, I would, as the practitioners, the social workers that are doing that review and assessment, are very mindful of that, and that is why we've got that kind of data, because we regularly ask that question of our practitioners, but the planning that can happen with those individual clients and their ageing carers is sometimes blocked by the carers themselves.
Well, the last question on transformation. On paragraph 7.2.3, is the voice of the service user represented on the transformation board?
No, the transformation board is actually a very small board. It's myself and three group managers and managers as we are allocating themes of work would then come and present to us as the managers. But so they're not on the board, but what they, as any development is being looked at, then it's the people involved that would go and have those conversations with the clients themselves. There is a Gwent-wide board. There's a Gwent-wide group called the Strategy Decision Makers, which is made up of, I think there's around 30 members with clients with learning disability across Gwent. So when there are any kind of developments across the 5 local authorities and the health board that need testing out and consultation, we would go back to that group, because that group have support from carers to enable them to function as a strategy decision making group. So we don't have them on the transition board, the transformation board, but there is a number of a service user forum that we would consult.
Actually, thanks. Mandy?
Right, we're going to move on to sort of transition. How has the change in eligibility criteria had an impact on the transition protocol launched in 2012?
The transition protocol, the protocol itself still stands because that's good practice of identifying people earlier on in their childhood to do that planning. Where it's then determined if somebody is eligible for a service, then obviously yes, it would have had does have an impact. But there are a number of people that what we call on the master list that would not meet the criteria for adult services prior to the eligibility criteria going up also. That is capturing everybody across education, education, health and social care that we feel that may need some support as they come into adulthood, but it may be just from education, it may be just from health. But ultimately, if we raise the bar, then there will be some people coming through transition that will no longer be eligible for a service. But it hasn't impacted on the protocol.
No. So how do you measure success? How have you been measuring success?
From the transition, it is around, there are a couple of internal measures of ensuring that, for example, that there is a social worker allocated to that case, that the transition social worker is allocated to that case at an appropriate time. So if it's a particularly complex case, let's say it may be kind of when they're 14, 15, and if it's a less complex case, it might be when they're 17. But certainly what we would measure success in that there shouldn't be anybody who is coming over to adult services at 18 where they need a service where we haven't been involved, and there should already be transition arrangements and discussions with the family around what's the care plan coming over that person's 18th birthday.
In 7.1.4, talking about the transition allocation panel, and you're using the phrase develop the provider market. What do you actually mean by, on 7.1.4, what do you actually mean by the phrase develop the provider market? 7.1.4.
7.1.4, bear with me. Sorry, okay.
Under transition.
Yep, it's got that. Basically, that links to our market development strategy. That what we are doing through that transition panel is tracking, should I say, the themes and the needs of individuals coming through. So there is say a particular pocket of of clients who are currently around 16, 17 with specific health needs, which are quite rare. So health and which impact on their social care needs. So, for example, we've identified that quite early, so we can start to have conversations with the RSLs and providers about, we know in 2 years' time this is the type of service we will be needing, or this is the type of support that these individuals will be needing, or this is the type of accommodation that these individuals will be needing. So when we say about developing the provider market, it's about us being proactive and talking to the sector to say, in 2 years' time, we know these are the type of things that we'll be looking for. So that's what we mean about enabling and developing.
So you'll be talking to organisations right across the board. We're talking, as you said, you mentioned RSLs, but we're also talking third sector organisations.
Yeah, absolutely.
The opportunities that Muse specifically here talking about the young. Again, declaring my interest of maternity young people. Would you say talk to an organisation such as that? Say about opportunities that they have, that they might have, and services that they might have, or services that they could, that maybe that you have funding for, which an organisation could then tap into, that they're offering a particular service, and that they could provide it within that budget that you've got that is allocated for these people.
Yeah, I mean, the conversations with the provider sector, third sector, are again ongoing. We did look at our market position statements, which kind of captures our needs analysis, which in those statements, and I think they did come through council at some stage. Basically, it's that needs assessment, so that's the basis of our conversation with the third sector, as we're going forward, we are going to need less of this, for example, but we know from our tracking of what's coming through the transition panel is that we're going to be needing more of that, because ultimately we've still only got the one budget pot. So what we are, having that constant dialogue with providers is, you need to be thinking about developing your services to provide this going forward and not to provide that. So we use that market intelligence, we use our own internal intelligence then about the kind of the themes that are coming through and the clients' needs that are coming through, and along with the demographics and the information that said we know about how many ageing carers, what we're expecting there. So that all comes together in that market position statement.
So the transition master list and working with children, services and education and making that transition database has improved the transition for all service users.
Yes, I mean, I can't put my hand on my heart and say that we have planned for every single person that then is the responsibility of adult services, because we do have the occasions where we have families moving into the area that we're not aware of. But again, if you went back prior to the protocol and the work that was done on the protocol and the master list, it was quite, it could be quite hit and miss. Not for all cases, but at least we have some security here of kind of, and then once a year it's almost like that checklist of checking with children's services, checking with education. Are we sure that we've got everybody that we know about? And we can only plan for those people that we know about. So how do we measure success? If you turned it on its head, if there is somebody that presents to adult services then that has been in the borough for some time that we didn't know about, and we haven't done any planning for, then that is a measure of where it hasn't worked, and that is something that also we track, and luckily that doesn't happen very, very often at all.
Should we move on now to the funding and fee modelling? But I am conscious of a number of the questions that we've got down have already been answered, so I don't want us to repeat things, please.
I think we'll start first of all, we're going back to the point made earlier in 7.3.1 about the supported living fee, the fact that it's gone from £25 to £14.50 per hour. I suppose the question is, can we deliver the same service? Or are we delivering a same or better service at £14.50 as delivering at £25?
Again, there was a lot of work that was done to agree on that £14.50. We will always keep that under review as minimum wage goes up. I mean, members will also be aware we've done a recent exercise around the general domiciliary care services where we have a maximum charge of £13.20 an hour. So there is, some additionality that's been built in, really around the maybe some of the additional training that's needed to support people with a learning disability. So the £25 an hour, so was right at the top of the range. It was around kind of maybe some weekend and night services and things like that. So the £14.50 did go into, what is the minimum wage, what's needed as far as training, what's management costs, the same kind of split down that we did across residential and nursing care. I am aware that some of the national figures through the UK domiciliary care market, whatever, are suggesting that the figures need to be around, £16 per hour. However, I am not concerned around the quality of care, around £14.50. We would all like to aspire to the living wage and the principles I absolutely sign up to, but if you're translating that into delivering within our allocated budget, that's we just have to, it's what's reasonable, and certainly I believe £14.50 is reasonable.
So are you working on the basis that that you think that the service will that there will be more demand, and basically it can only be afforded at £14.50 an hour?
Well, if in the community that's actually £13.20 and not £14.50. This is purely around the fee level negotiated. So within supported living, which is slightly different to domiciliary care. I would expect that as we go forward, certainly our market position statement, there will be less call on supported living. Again, because of client feedback, is clients want their own front door, not to be sharing with other people, in which case we'd then be looking at use of domiciliary care agencies rather than supported living.
Sorry, can I move us along? I'm conscious of the time. Jill, can you just explain the funding explained in paragraph 7.12.3 and how the Land Thetford Grange resettlement was used?
There's a section 28A agreement with the Health Board, and I think the fee that we have from the income that we have from the Health Board every year is £990,000. So that's that agreement is still in place. It has been, that was calculated on the number of people that were resettled from Land Thetford Grange in the Torvine area when Land Thetford Grange closed. There quite often it is raised by the Health Board. However, I know, because literally I've seen it in my inbox today, that those agreements for this financial year have been signed. So that £999,000 goes towards the is income in Cathy's budget, which we support people in the community, as otherwise they would have been in hospital beds.
Right, move it along then, Mandy.
Okay, we're going on to commissioning now. How many providers have you supported, and how many social enterprises has been developed, providing how many people with paid employment?
Right, okay. There's a social enterprise in its infancy with Evolve, and I have to say I am not aware of all the detail of that. It has a bit of a strange title, I think. I'm trying to think what it is. Sorry, what page are you on, if you don't mind asking?
Sorry, Appendix 2, it is to be able to work and be paid for it.
Page 89.
89.
Right, okay. Right. Thank you. Okay, let's see. There is a social... there are a number of social enterprises that I am aware that are around the borough, but again, these have been set up by voluntary and sector partners. So we are not involved in those as such. Bronavon, certainly. Jim has done some work with Bronavon around looking at people with a learning disability working in their canteen. But again, what we do is we can have conversations, then it's up to those individual organisations kind of take that forward. So I wouldn't have the data of how many people are in their employment. Evolve, certainly, I know Jim was, so I keep on going back to Jim and Kathy, I'm sorry, I don't like to, because it is a joint approach. They've been having conversations around Evolve, and I think I made a note somewhere. Sorry. Apologies, I can't find that, but certainly I'm aware that they have started another social enterprise in the borough, but I don't have the detail on it anyway with me, but I will find that out. There was another scheme in Garndiffath around social enterprise, but to say what I don't have the detail of, Councillor, is the kind of how many people with a learning disability they support, because they wouldn't necessarily have come through all known to the local authority. And again, if we have the more the clients in the kind of lower eligibility criteria that may access some of these schemes a bit more, the more likely are they not to know them. They're not going to be on our caseloads, so to speak. But what I can do is I can ask for additional information if that would help. And apologies that I haven't got that to hand.
No, that's fine. So really, you're not told how many real jobs have been created. You wouldn't have that information either. Then.
No, but I can ask to see what information we can get.
Okay. The Transport Hub. How will this work and save money? Who are your partners with the Transport Hub? And that's paragraph 7.6.2. On page 49.
The Transport Hub actually is a piece of work that's been led corporately, looking at what transport is provided through education, any parts of the council basically that have that use transport. So, say mainly education and social care are the highest users. There is a piece of work being led through Neighbourhood Services, I think, actually mapping out exactly what is spent in transport in each of the divisions, and looking at procurement, to seeing if we can bring those costs down, because I think we did spend just in the learning disability around 48,000 on transport last year. We have looked at just developing a supportive transport policy as well within social care, which is due to come to Cabinet on July the 7th. In there are some recommendations around, who is eligible for transport and who isn't when they are accessing day opportunities, and particularly one of the issues that we come across daily and have those conversations about is where a client has access to a Motability car. So they have a Motability car in their names because of their disability through their learning disability, then the expectation is that that car would be used to transport that person for day activities, for example. So again, we have in the past had clients who have their carers have been allocated a car through Motability, but they also have transport. So. So two things there. That piece of work is being led corporately around the hub, and the second bit is around our own social care transport policy, which is due to come to Cabinet on the 7th.
I think one of the things we were discussing with Jim was if we were likely to recommend that if we invest more money in teaching people to use public transport, that would be a better investment rather than just continue to provide them with transport.
And that's covered in the policy as well. Yeah.
One of the things we wanted wanted a clarification on, if you have a look at paragraph 7.7.1 on page 48, you talk about a block contract, and yet in the next paragraph you talk about to improve flexibility and efficiency, you're looking to go to spot contracts, not block contracts. So in one paragraph you're saying one seems to contradict the other.
Okay. Sorry, I've just come across this, the social enterprise of Evolve. It's called In a Pickle, but I will find out in a pickle it is. I knew I had it somewhere. Traditionally we've used block contracts with providers because potentially what we can get then is what I would refer to as a lower unit rate. So per person per day might be a lower rate. But what can happen there is if you have purchased 10 places, then and you assess somebody and you're looking at eligibility, that person you can almost like fit into that space that you've got available, which is not person-centred. So what we're trying to move away from that block, because then you also have voids. So you might have purchased 10 places, but you've only got 7 people going, and you don't want to kind of find 3 people to squash into those places when it's not going to be the right for that person. So what we've been doing is, as we've got more person-centred, we've been kind of potentially carrying more voids, so it's not cost-effective. So what we've done is we've moved from, rather than purchasing 10 block, we do what we call a spot purchase. So we still use that same provider. So where we've got 6 people going, we pay for those individually on 6 different, what we call individual contracts, which might cost a little bit more, but we're not paying for the voids. So then as we've got people, then clients coming to us who want something different, we're not trying to squash them into those set places. Sorry, I hope that makes sense. I didn't explain it very well.
I think the last one on commissioning is, how do you measure the success of your commissioning strategy?
For me, it is around feedback from clients that they're getting what they feel that they need. We don't have people waiting for any kind of support or services. And the biggest thing there for me is, and this is where the long-term work goes in, that's particularly around the work with the RSLs, that we've got the right accommodation for the right, that people are asking for. So I'm sorry, it's a little bit as general as that. It is that we can offer what people say that they want, If we get a lot of, and that's the difficult, the more challenging bit about working with providers to get them to change their service models, because obviously they're independent contractors. And there have been, we've had conversations with some people, maybe over 2 years, saying, actually in the future, we may not, we don't think we're going to be needing this. You need to be looking at something different. And those people now having voids, saying, ooh, I've got voids now. Why have you got any clients? And we were like, no, because people don't want you. So you can have the conversations, but we can't always force the change.
But the service users who are in placements then, do you go back and sort of question them after and make sure that everything is okay and they are happy?
Well, yeah, I mean, this is one of the things that we do. We'll certainly run kind of answer, but actually, this is what you said you wanted, and how is that working for you? I think you've probably seen that those conversations have gone on. Some of the information that we've been done in day opportunities, we asked people in day opportunities, how were we doing as far as what things we were offering? Is that what they wanted? And as this is quite hot off the press, really, what we do is kind of like satisfaction surveys in a way that could be done with the client, in easy read and whatever. And I didn't know whether I was going to have enough copies, but I certainly have. I've just brought an example of then how we look at that, really. So for each of the day opportunities, whether it's the Bistro, Green Wellies, Wednesday Warriors, I didn't print them all off for each one. It was just to give you, and the data is then, we can analyse it for each particular day opportunity, but this is just the aggregated one. It's about, what do you like most? What do you don't like? Done with the client person, so we can get that easy feedback to say, hopefully it answers your question. Sorry, it's just opportune that I had it with me. Are we doing what you want? Yeah. So I'm trying to learn from that. And there's some comments on there that you think, well, yeah, okay, that's obviously not right. People don't like going in the woods, and they go near the stingy nettles. Sorry.
Jill, just on the last one, accommodation, we had a lot of questions for you, but I think throughout you've actually answered them in advance. The last one is, what have you learnt through the development of KENAT, and how would you utilise this in any future developments?
I think the training flat's going to be great. I mean, we haven't had the first admission yet, because I know that Kathy's still working on those protocols, but what we have is an opportunity there for people who don't know if they're going to like that type of living to test it out. So learning from testing that flat out, we'll know kind of what's right for people and what works and what doesn't. So it gives, we have an opportunity there. The transformation officer was also the person who did the work with individuals around selection, and as you probably saw in the, did you have a chance to see the DVD? Yeah. And I guess when we look at this, I always go back to Jenny to say, because she was so involved on a day-to-day basis, okay, what do we do differently and whatever, and I will be guided by her, if I'm honest. I think the selection process it's difficult because you don't want to raise people's expectations, but you have to go and have a conversation. If they've put an expression of interest, you have to go and have a conversation. And it's how you manage that expectation and make that decision with that person and the carer, looking at the compatibility and whatever. How do you engage that person, have that right conversation? So if in the end that person isn't allocated a place, that they don't feel too let down. And I think that's the balance. And I'm not saying we did it wrong. I don't think we did do it wrong, but I think we can always learn and improve on that every time.
I think the thing was, and we did speak to Cathy quite at length on this, because this location is near to perfect as you can get, those facilities are not going to be available in Blenavon and Somerton House and so forth. So therefore, you've got to be very careful that you put the right people in the right location, and also taking into account the wishes and abilities of the carers as well. As we said, it's no good putting somebody in Somerton House if the carer lives in Blenavon.
But looking back some of those key messages from people, it's what's important to them. It's about friendship. It is about having their front door. It's about friendship, and it's about communities. Not necessarily part of it, I'm sure, is they're near to the shops and whatever, but it is what the sense that I got anyway from Kynant is the friendships within the flats, you know, what they've built up there, and it's about how you engage as people in the community then. So, but front door friendships are certainly two key messages that are coming through.
Before I wrap it up, does anybody want to come in with anything? Happy?
Just one thing which I was a little bit unsure about, I don't think really handle. 7.9, you talk about asset-based community development, so what does that actually mean?
It's working on people's strengths, actually. Asset, A, B, C, D, yeah, asset, and again, Jim has done a presentation on this. I'm quite happy to send you the presentation as well. But it is about working with individuals and communities to build on the strengths of those individuals and communities rather than the fix-it approach. So it's working with people in such a way that you ask them, you work with them to find their own solutions and the community to find their solutions rather than looking to an organisation, maybe like the council, to fix it. So it is very much from an individual and community perspective. There's a lot of research on it, and it's, you know, certainly there's some big projects over Europe, and I think it's going to, a presentation is going to the local service board as well. Jim's managed to secure the person who's kind of like a founder in this way of thinking to present to the local service board. So again, but I'm quite happy to send that presentation to you. That it will give you more justice to what it means, really.
Okay, we're all happy. Okay, Jill, thanks ever so much for coming along, and thanks ever so much for your answers. And again, can you pass on to your staff how much we appreciated the visits that were arranged for us?
Okay, thank you. I'm just conscious I've promised to send you quite a bit of information there. I'm also conscious it's my last day and I'm going on leave for a week. Are you all right that I action that when I come back?
A week? You're away for a week?
I'm away for a week.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Thank you. Unless you can send it to me by 5 o'clock, because I forgot all the stuff that I said. Thank you.
I think in our recommendations we must make comment on how useful we found the visits and how we were impressed with the staff and how we were impressed with people, how much they enjoyed what they were doing, and they seemed to be doing what they wanted to do. I think we should make comment about the report that we were unhappy or disappointed, whatever word we want to use, to say that there wasn't factual information in there about the potential savings that they're talking about. There wasn't any figure in there. And a comment about the report that it didn't give us all the information in a chronological sort of sequence. The other thing I picked up on is the recommendation that we make that they review the transport system, and also they look to invest on teaching the service users to use public transport as opposed, and also I was quite disturbed to hear that people have been given money to purchase a car and then they're expecting transport. That seems absolutely nonsensical to me. Well, in that case, they shouldn't have the money for the car. You know, you can't.
Listening obviously to the information you've been given today, you need to decide whether you've been given enough evidence to decide whether the service direction that social care and housing are taking at the moment is the correct service direction for the 21st century, as stated in the report. One thing I did pick up that you may want to consider as a recommendation is investing more time and effort into the asset-based development. I think Jim made a very good point. It's not about looking at people's deficits, it's about working with their strengths and also working with the community to recognise those strengths and find a solution rather than relying on local authorities and other organisations. You may want to consider that as a recommendation. Another point I found whilst listening was a little bit confusing was Appendix 2 is a matrix of what service users' aspirations are, what they desire, what they want from their services, and our response to those aspirations, where it does say that we've developed social enterprises, when in fact we've helped providers develop those social enterprises. Is slightly different, so I think a bit of clarity around what we've actually done and what the outcomes of what our response, our reported response is, should be clearer within the report.
Yeah, because with job opportunities, people going out, there was no figures, there was no data, they couldn't say how many people were in full-time paid employment. It needs to be clearer.
Because you're now being asked to decide on this, to recommend whether you support this service direction, so you need to be sure that you've got enough information to be able to do that. So what would you like to recommend? Do you support this service direction, or do you feel at this time you don't have enough information to do that comfortably?
I'm happy to say that we support it, but we were disappointed there weren't any more factual information in there. It's an assumption, isn't it, as opposed to, we can prove this by this.
Okay, that's noted, Chair.
Any other want to come up with anything else? Other recommendations? I think we should put in there somewhere that they should take particular note on the eligibility for the future developments, taking into account of the potential isolation of those developments, and therefore to make sure they have the right people with the right skills, that they're not going to become isolated in places like Glenavon and Somerton House, rather than just stick the next ones that are available or in the line, because, as we said a number of times, because this one development is so close to the shops and everything else, that is great, but these others are not going to be. So if you have... Exactly. So we don't want to, by putting somebody in there, create more problems than we've got already.
Okay, that's noted, Chair.
Anything else? Well, we'll do the same as we've done in previous ones. Helen and I will work together to come up with the recommendations. We'll then email them out to you with a couple of days for you to look at it. And if you think of anything else, please email them back so we can make sure that we're all happy with the recommendations. Okay, we're happy to move on now to the next agenda item 7, which is a summary of executive decisions, page 91. And then we've had conversations on the usefulness of this agenda item, but we'll go through them. So if we go to page 95, any comments? Page 96, 97, and 98 is blank, 99 is blank as well. Yeah, but there aren't any decisions on there. Okay. Agenda item 8, discussion on the item to be taken at the next meeting. The next is, do you want to explain it visually?
The next meeting is on the 2nd of January at 2 o'clock.
July.
Pardon me. And we'll be looking at a number of feeder items and choosing the basket of items going forward. This year, it's slightly different from last year. What we need to do in that meeting is make sure that we come up with a key question that we need to answer within the scrutiny of any item selected, and the purpose of the scrutiny activity. So that will be done on 2nd of July. And we'll work with the service area and the chair beforehand to make sure we get all the right feeder items.
And also, if any committee member has a burning issues that they want to be scrutinised, please let us know in advance so we can explore that. I think that brings the meeting to a close. Spot on 3:30. Can I say, once again, thanks ever so much for turning up. And I think it's relevant to note my